There are moments in a woman's life when being alone feels completely different. Not because she suddenly becomes weak, not because she cannot live without a man, and certainly not because every woman follows the same psychological timeline. It is because certain life stages can change what she values, what she fears, and what kind of emotional connection suddenly becomes much more important. And here is where most men misunderstand what they are seeing. A woman who once wanted excitement may eventually start craving stability. A woman who once walked away easily may begin thinking differently about companionship, trust, and having someone beside her when life becomes uncertain. But there is a deeper question. When do these psychological shifts tend to become strongest? And what does that actually mean for a man who is trying to understand female behavior? Because the most surprising part is this: the age itself is not what changes her. The life transition happening around that age does. And once you understand those transitions, some female behavior that previously looked confusing suddenly becomes much easier to read. If you have ever wondered why a woman's attitude toward relationships can change dramatically as she gets older, you are not imagining the difference. But you may be interpreting it incorrectly. A woman in her 20s may evaluate relationships through a completely different psychological lens than a woman approaching midlife. And a woman entering later adulthood may have priorities that would have seemed almost irrelevant to her younger self. That does not mean every woman follows the same path. It means human priorities change when circumstances change. This is where the popular idea of the age when women need men most becomes misleading. Women do not suddenly become incapable of independence at a particular birthday. Instead, certain ages often correspond with major psychological transitions: identity formation, long-term commitment decisions, career and family changes, changes in social circles, empty nest experiences, divorce, widowhood, retirement, or simply a growing awareness that time and emotional energy are valuable. And those transitions can make companionship feel more meaningful. If you are a man trying to understand women, this distinction matters enormously. Because if you think she needs a man, you may approach her from the wrong position. But if you understand why companionship becomes more psychologically valuable at certain stages, you can recognize what she is actually looking for. The first important period is usually the stage when adulthood stops feeling like an experiment and starts feeling like a direction. For many people, that happens somewhere around the late 20s and early 30s. This is when questions that once felt distant become much more immediate. Where is my life going? Who do I want beside me? What kind of relationship actually fits the person I have become? And suddenly, chemistry alone may not be enough. The second transition often appears around midlife. This can be an especially powerful period because identity gets reevaluated. A woman may have spent years building a career, raising children, supporting a partner, caring for family, or simply surviving responsibilities. Then circumstances change, children become independent, a marriage ends, a career changes, parents age, priorities shift. And she may begin asking a question she previously avoided: what do I actually want for myself now? That question can completely transform the way she evaluates men. And then comes the third transition, later adulthood, when companionship can take on another meaning entirely. At that point, attraction may still matter, romance may still matter, physical affection may still matter, but emotional safety, reliability, shared experiences, and having someone who genuinely shows up can become disproportionately valuable. Here is the curiosity most men miss. The woman who seems less interested in chasing excitement may not have lost interest in relationships. She may simply have changed the definition of what makes a relationship worth her energy. And there is another psychological shift that matters even more. Sometimes a woman does not become more interested in having a man because she suddenly wants more attention. She becomes more selective because she has learned how expensive the wrong relationship can be. That distinction will completely change how you interpret her behavior. Let's start by destroying one of the biggest myths. People often imagine female relationship psychology as a simple equation: younger woman equals excitement, older woman equals security. That is far too simplistic. Human beings are not programmed by birthdays, they are shaped by experience. Attachment theory helps explain part of this. Our relationship experiences can influence how we respond to closeness, vulnerability, rejection, and commitment. A person who has experienced betrayal may become cautious. Someone who has experienced a secure relationship may become more comfortable with intimacy. Someone who repeatedly encountered unreliable partners may become intensely protective of their independence. So when a woman reaches a certain age, the important question is not, what does she need because she is this age? The better question is, what has life taught her about what she can and cannot tolerate? That is where the three major transitions become fascinating. The first is roughly the late 20s into the early 30s. This is often a period of consolidation. The endless possibility of early adulthood begins to narrow into actual choices. A woman may have dated casually for years. She may have experienced exciting relationships that ultimately went nowhere. She may have discovered that attraction and compatibility are not the same thing, and cognitive dissonance can appear. She may believe she wants independence while simultaneously wanting a deep partnership. She may say she does not need anyone while privately wanting someone she can genuinely trust. Those statements are not necessarily contradictions, they can coexist. Because independence answers the question, can I survive alone? Intimacy answers a different question. Who do I want beside me while I live my life? That is a profound difference. Now imagine a woman who reaches 30 after several disappointing relationships. She is successful. She pays her own bills. She has friends. She can travel alone. She can build a life without depending on a partner. Then she meets two men. One is charismatic, unpredictable, emotionally unavailable, and exciting. The other is calm, consistent, ambitious, emotionally mature, and clear about what he wants. Earlier in her life, she might have been fascinated by the uncertainty of the first man. But after enough experience, the psychological cost of uncertainty may become much more obvious. She does not necessarily become attracted to the second man because he is older or because she suddenly needs security. She may simply have developed a clearer understanding of what creates peace rather than chaos. And that leads directly to the second transition, midlife. This stage can create something psychologists often describe as identity reevaluation. The roles that once defined a woman may change: mother, wife, professional, caregiver, daughter, provider, support system. Suddenly, one or more of those roles can become different. And when identity changes, relationship preferences can change with it. A woman who spent 20 years prioritizing everyone else may suddenly realize that she has neglected her own emotional needs. That realization can be uncomfortable. It can also be liberating. She may become less impressed by surface level charm and more interested in emotional intelligence. Less impressed by promises and more interested in consistency. Less interested in being chosen and more interested in deciding whether she wants the relationship. That last shift is critical because mature attraction is not simply about someone wanting you, it is about someone evaluating whether you belong in the life they have consciously built. And then there is the third stage, later adulthood. Here, companionship can become increasingly connected to quality of life, not dependence. Companionship. There is a difference. Social connection matters across the lifespan. People often benefit from meaningful relationships, emotional support, shared activities, affection, and a sense of belonging. So when a woman reaches later adulthood, a good relationship may represent something very different from what it represented at 25. It can mean having someone to call after a difficult day, someone to travel with, someone who understands your history, someone who notices when you are quiet, someone who can sit beside you without needing constant entertainment. And notice what is happening. The attraction is no longer only about what a man can give her. It can become about the experience of sharing life with someone trustworthy. This is why the title's phrase, need a man most, requires one important correction. A healthy woman does not need a man to complete her, but she may increasingly value what a healthy relationship contributes to an already complete life. That distinction separates emotional maturity from emotional dependency. And there is one more psychological principle men need to understand: ego protection. When someone has been hurt repeatedly, they may protect themselves by insisting they do not need anyone. That statement can sometimes be genuine, other times, it can be armor. The mistake is trying to break that armor. A mature man does not say, "You need me." He demonstrates that being around him feels safe, respectful, peaceful, and mutually beneficial. That is a completely different psychological position. So, what should you actually do with this information? Not manipulate her, not wait for a birthday when you think she will suddenly become desperate for companionship. And definitely not approach women as though age automatically creates emotional dependence. Instead, use these 5 principles. Step 1. Stop reading age as destiny. Your first action is simple. Stop assuming a woman behaves a certain way because she reached a particular number. Age is a context, it is not a personality. The psychology behind this is important because stereotyping creates confirmation bias. If you believe a 45-year-old woman must want security, you will notice every behavior that confirms your belief and ignore everything that contradicts it. You will misread independence as rejection. You may interpret boundaries as fear. You may interpret selectiveness as disinterest. And you may completely miss genuine attraction because it does not look the way you expected. The most common mistake? Trying to date the stereotype instead of the person. Ask better questions. What has she experienced? What does she value? What does she protect? What does she repeatedly say matters to her? What kind of behavior earns her trust? That information is far more valuable than her age. Step 2. Become the man who adds peace, not pressure. If you want to understand mature female attraction, watch what happens when a woman feels emotionally safe. She does not have to perform. She does not have to guess where she stands. She does not have to decode every message. She does not feel punished for having boundaries. That is where emotional security becomes powerful. A reliable man does not create confusion simply to appear valuable. He communicates clearly. He follows through. He respects her independence. He can express interest without demanding immediate reassurance. Why does this work psychologically? Because predictability reduces unnecessary uncertainty. And when uncertainty decreases, people often have more emotional space to experience genuine connection. The mistake? Confusing confidence with emotional control. Do not try to control her emotions. Do not intentionally disappear to make her anxious. Do not create jealousy because you want to test whether she cares. That may create attention. It does not create trust. Step 3. Understand what her life stage is asking from her. This is where your emotional intelligence becomes more important than your dating tactics. A woman in her early 30s may be thinking about long-term compatibility. A woman in midlife may be rebuilding an identity after major life changes. A woman later in adulthood may value companionship, emotional presence, shared interests, and stability in ways she did not prioritize earlier. But those are possibilities, not guarantees. Your job is to listen. If she talks about wanting peace, listen. If she talks about wanting adventure, listen. If she says she enjoys being alone, believe her. If she says she wants partnership, believe that too. Psychologically, this creates something extremely important: accurate attunement. Attunement means responding to the person who is actually in front of you instead of forcing them into your expectations. The common mistake? Assuming you already know what she wants. That is how men start giving solutions to problems she never asked them to solve. Step 4. Do not try to rescue her. This one is critical. A woman going through loneliness, divorce, disappointment, or a major life transition may genuinely appreciate support. But support is not the same as rescue. If you make yourself responsible for fixing her emotional life, you create an unhealthy dynamic. You become the therapist, the savior, the constant reassurance machine. And eventually, resentment can appear. Healthy connection works differently. You can listen without absorbing everything. You can support without controlling. You can care without becoming responsible for another adult's entire emotional world. The psychology behind this is simple. Healthy attachment allows closeness and individuality. Two people can depend on each other emotionally without becoming psychologically fused. The mistake? Thinking that the more indispensable you become, the more she will love you. Sometimes the opposite happens. A person can appreciate you deeply while still needing space to remain themselves. Step 5. Watch behavior, not just words. This is where men often become confused. A woman may say she wants a relationship, but does she create space for one? She may say she values consistency, but does she respond consistently? She may say she wants emotional maturity, but can both of you handle disagreement without punishment, manipulation, or contempt? Psychology is revealed through patterns, not isolated sentences. If she repeatedly initiates contact, makes time for you, remembers details, introduces you into her world, communicates openly, and follows through, those behaviors provide meaningful information. Likewise, if she repeatedly disappears, avoids clarity, breaks commitments, or keeps you permanently uncertain, do not explain those behaviors away simply because you want the relationship to work. The common mistake? Falling in love with potential while ignoring patterns. You do not need to become suspicious of every behavior. You need to become observant. Step 6, build a life she can join, not a life that collapses without her. This may be the most important principle of all. If you want a healthy relationship, become a man whose identity exists before the relationship. Your friendships, your goals, your work, your health, your interests, your standards, your emotional stability. Why? Because attraction is healthier when two people choose each other from strength rather than desperation. If your entire emotional world depends on whether one woman texts you back, you will naturally become anxious. And anxiety changes behavior. You over-message, you over-explain, you seek reassurance, you interpret silence as rejection, you chase certainty, and suddenly the relationship becomes less about connection and more about emotional regulation. That is not what you want. You want to be capable of saying, I want you in my life, not, I cannot function without you. There is power in that difference. Now take a step back. Forget the numbers for a moment. Forget 28, forget 45, forget 60. Look at the psychological pattern underneath all of them. People change when life changes them, and women are no exception. A woman may become more selective after heartbreak, more intentional after years of uncertainty, more protective of her peace after a difficult marriage, more open to companionship after discovering how valuable emotional connection can be. But none of this means you should sit around waiting for a woman to reach an age when you believe she will need you. That mindset will make you impatient, and impatience is dangerous in relationships. You start calculating. How long should I wait? Why has she not texted? Does she miss me? Is she finally realizing what she lost? What age does she become more emotionally dependent? Those questions pull you away from the only question that actually matters. Is this relationship healthy, mutual, and right for both people? That is the reframe. You are not trying to become indispensable. You are trying to become emotionally valuable. There is a massive difference. Indispensability can create dependency. Emotional value creates choice. And choice is where healthy attraction becomes powerful. A woman should be able to live without you. You should be able to live without her. And yet both of you can look at each other and say, my life is better with you in it. That is not weakness. That is mature partnership. Now think about the 3 life stages we explored. The first is often the transition from exploration into intentional adulthood. The second can involve identity reevaluation and major life restructuring. The third can place greater value on companionship, emotional presence, and shared quality of life. But remember what connects all 3, not age. Meaning, when people become more conscious of how they want to spend their time, they become more careful about who gets access to it. That is why consistency becomes powerful. Not because women become desperate, because wasted emotional energy becomes less attractive. Think about that. When you are 20, you may tolerate months of confusion because you think you have unlimited time. Later, you may look at the same situation and think, why would I spend another 6 months trying to convince someone to choose me? That is not bitterness. That is clarity. And men need their own version of that clarity. Stop measuring your worth by whether a woman wants you. Stop measuring your masculinity by how many women you can attract. Stop trying to create emotional dependency because you are afraid someone will leave. Instead, develop the qualities that remain valuable across every life stage. Emotional control, integrity, consistency, curiosity, purpose, communication, respect, physical and emotional presence. The ability to handle rejection without becoming cruel, the ability to love without abandoning yourself, the ability to walk away without needing revenge. Those qualities do not expire, and they do not depend on manipulating someone into needing you. Now, if you are currently dealing with a woman who has pulled away, do not immediately assume her age explains it. Maybe she is protecting herself. Maybe she has different priorities. Maybe she is emotionally unavailable. Maybe she is uncertain. Maybe she simply does not want the relationship. You cannot solve uncertainty by inventing a psychological theory that makes you feel better. You solve it by observing reality. That may be uncomfortable, but clarity is kinder than fantasy. And if you are a man who has been rejected, remember this: her decision does not automatically define your value. Two people can be fundamentally decent and still be wrong for each other. Two people can have chemistry and still lack compatibility. Two people can love each other and still fail to build a healthy relationship. That is adulthood. You do not need every woman to choose you. You need to become the kind of man who can choose wisely too. So when you meet a woman at any age, do not walk into the relationship asking, "Does she need me?" Ask, "Does she respect me? Does she communicate honestly? Does she make room for me? Do our values align? Can we create peace without sacrificing individuality?" Those questions will protect you far more than any dating trick. And perhaps the most important lesson is this: a woman reaching a certain age does not suddenly make her ready for love. Life experience may simply make her more honest about what love must feel like to be worth keeping. And the same is true for you. You are not here to convince someone that you are valuable. You are here to live in a way that makes your value visible, quietly, consistently, without begging, without performing, without manipulating. Because the strongest relationship is not the one where someone fears losing you. It is the one where both people understand what they have and choose to protect it. If this perspective changed the way you think about female psychology, subscribe for more videos on relationships, emotional intelligence, attraction, and mature communication. And tell me in the comments, which matters more to you in a relationship: chemistry, peace, or emotional consistency? I genuinely want to know your answer. Remember this line: the goal is never to become someone she cannot live without. The goal is to become someone she would never want to live without, because life is genuinely better together.